So I'm going to kick this off with a couple questions for everybody to think about. If you discovered burglaries were going on in your neighborhood, what would you do to stop it? And this is always one of my favorite questions because this helps drive awareness. You know, if you hear that there's a rash of break-ins, the burglars are getting in through the back window, you're going to probably put up some motion sensor lights, maybe turn on your security alarm system, get a dog, or have a beware of dog sign at the front of your house, even though you may only have 3 cats. But it gets that awareness going. So, you know, if you hear about the burglaries, you know, you're going to do something to make sure you protect your home. So I'm going to flip it. If you discovered cyber criminals were stealing data from other organizations, what would you do to protect your organization? And I'm going to throw that little softball over to Murray, add a little commentary there for me. What are some of the things you guys are doing at Beyond Trust or you recognize to make sure you're protecting your organization?
Well, first you start with a cybersecurity plan, right? And every good cybersecurity plan starts with a good inventory, a good knowledge of what you have, the resources, and then you start digging deeper into the accounts, the resources, end-of-life devices, and building a plan to protect them. Especially if your peer organizations or your neighbors in this scenario are being breached in the same way. But you got to start with the basics and know what you're protecting. If your home doesn't have anything to protect and there's really nothing in there, why would you even have an alarm system?
I agree, exactly. So I'm going to kind of take it a little step further. And one of the things that I feel because of my day job and what I do and what I promote is, for me, people are a critical layer. Murray was absolutely right. You got to know what you need to protect. So you got to know what you have first. But with your employees or your family at home, you know, you need to make sure that you're educating them or they're aware of how to set the alarm, turn off the alarm, those kind of things. But in your organizations, you want to make sure that your people are a part of that critical layer as well. One of the things that I hear time and time again that drives me nuts, you know, we all have our pet peeves in life. I hear people say humans or people are the weakest link. Yes, they are the ones that are clicking on the link. They are the ones that aren't patching or misconfiguring servers and the bad guys get in. But at the same time, they can be your strongest asset. And with education and awareness and making that a part of your culture, that can really help drive home your security program for your organization. And that's what we're going to be talking about tonight, is how to drive that security awareness to create that security culture that you have, or to create within your organization.
If you're protecting your house, simple enough, or you got kids with bicycles, if you give them a bicycle lock and you don't train them on how to put it on every time they ride it, we have a culture problem. That's your people.
Yep, that's exactly right. Yeah, exactly. Which I think is what happened to me when I was a kid. I ended up having my bike stolen because I forgot to put the lock on. So lesson learned. You know, you click on that phishing link and you get that cold sweat and then you get the remedial training. Yeah, you never forget it. It's that memory that gets burned in you. So, all right. So breakdown for the next 250 slides and 3 hours of presentation that we have. No, I'm only teasing. There's only 100 slides.
You are a professor.
Well, at least for the next, 45 minutes or so, I'm going to touch upon the current state of affairs, what we're experiencing here in the world. I'm going to talk a little bit about human nature. And what I mean by that is, why are we as humans falling for these type of phishing attacks? We're going to touch upon security awareness, dive into security culture, and then we will wrap it up. And as Murray said, as we go along, he'll be providing some tips as well. So first up, let's talk about the current state of affairs. I already mentioned, and we touched upon it already with the protecting your home and the culture, but 91% of cyber espionage begins with phishing. And that comes from Trend Micro. But essentially 70 to 90% is where we're seeing a lot of the attacks. They do resonate with some type of phishing attack. But 95% of the security incidents always involve some type of human error. Somebody misconfigures something, somebody forgets to put a patch, somebody misses inventorying a new server and it ends up on the network and gets connected to the internet. That's where we're getting our human error. So going back to the humans are the weakest link, okay, this supports that, but now we need to flip this on its head and work to get the humans to be our strongest asset. So how many times have we heard this? In emails and letters, I know every time I get an email and I read, "We take cybersecurity very seriously," I'm immediately racing through that email trying to figure out, okay, what got taken? Murray, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, and this is, the cliche. Many of you have heard it before. Compliance does not equal security. We have to do this for compliance, guys. We need to be secure in order to be compliant, not the other way around.
Right.
So cybersecurity comes first above compliance. That's what we need to take seriously. Unfortunately, in many cultures and many businesses, they take the regulation seriously and infer the opposite. And this is something that we have to change in our culture. And the organizations that do well against cyber threats are the ones that have unlearned the compliance cliche.
Not to throw another cliche, but I think it was Yoda that said you had to unlearn what you learned. So, got to have a Star Wars reference, So, all right. Great insight on that. Let's have a look at a very interesting tweet from a gentleman by the name of BJ Fogg, who is kind of the father of behavioral models. But there are 3 truths about human nature, and this is something I want you to think about as we go through the presentation we talked today. We are lazy, social, and creatures of habit. So we want to design products that apply for that reality. Now, when I say lazy, I don't mean we're sitting on the couch and, eating bonbons and ice cream all the time. We're lazy in the sense of when it comes to having to take on new projects or having to do things, we don't like change. In general, we're not keen on having change go on in our lives, unless we're the ones implementing the change, and then we're all for it. But when change happens to us, we like it the way things are usually, hence the creatures of habit. We're social in the sense that, for the most part, we like to interact with people, conversations. This whole COVID thing is kind of killing a lot of us that like to be out in the community with chapters, security groups, the CSNP. We're having to rely on virtual, so it's kind of putting a damper on that. So lazy, creatures of habit, and social. That's human nature. So as we dive into human nature, our brain's job essentially is to interpret, filter, and present a reality to us. As we see something, we see that I'm looking at a camera right now. I've got 2 monitors in front of me. I know that my brain is telling me that that's what they are because I set them up and I know them and worked with them all the years. That's my reality. So if I bring up something like this, is the reality that you're seeing, oh my gosh, there's Daniel Craig without any bathing suit on. So all the ladies are enjoying that. And then we have the lady walking out and parts of her are covered up, but we're looking at it going, oh my God, she's not wearing any clothes. That is our brain filtering whether you're now believing that they are clothes, but our brain is actually interpreting the fact that they weren't wearing any clothes because all we saw was skin. So the brain goes to the fact that, oh my gosh, they weren't wearing any clothes. So looking at perception versus reality, the phenomenal power of the human mind, according to research at Cambridge University, it doesn't matter in what order the letters in a word are. The only important thing is that the first and last letter be in the right place. How the heck could I read that when all the letters are all transposed, except for the fact that the first and last letter? My brain is on automatic pilot. It knows or recognizes what that word is, able to interpret it very quickly and filter it and allow me to read that. I'm not going to read the rest. I'll just let you do that. But that's just one of the interesting things, the way that our brains work when we're on autopilot, when it's going through and doing that work for us. So it brings me to a concept presented by Daniel Kahneman, who is a Nobel winning prize economical behaviorist professional expert. And looking at marketing, looking at economics and the way people spend money and those aspects, he came up with these 2 systems. And I think this applies for us as well in regards to security. 2 systems. The first one, system 1, fast thinking. a bit error prone, but it's our autopilot. You ever get in the car when we were driving to our office, but you get in the car and you get your phone call comes in and you have a conversation with somebody, and the next thing you know, you're at work and you're sitting there, oh my gosh, I barely remember driving here. That was your brain working on autopilot because it knew how to get there. Your subconscious essentially getting you to work because you were doing system 2, the slower thinking, having that conversation with somebody. Whether you want to look at that as multitasking, but really your brain can really only focus on one thing to do at a time. The other times things are being done when you think you're multitasking, essentially is that fast thinking autopilot. So if I were to say, what's 2 plus 2? We all know it's 4. We just know that. That's part of our autopilot capability. If I were to say, what's 5,327 divided by 86? You could solve it. You get your phone out and open up the calculator app and punch in the numbers, or you could sit down with pen and paper and go through and calculate it. We as humans have the ability to sit down and logically work through the solution, which by the way is 61.94, in case anybody was really concerned about that. That is the system 2 thinking. That is us taking those extra steps, working through the logic to make sure that we understand it or come to the answer that we need. So system 1, fast thinking, autopilot. System 2 is the extra forethought. It's working through logic and doing puzzles, problem solving, but it takes a lot of effort. So that's why we're not always doing system 2 thinking. But when we start thinking about so when we start talking about security awareness and our security programs, when we talk about phishing and those kind of attacks, that's where a lot of the times we see people do that system 1 thinking when we want them to do system 2. Okay, let me shift a little bit here, and I want to kind of look at that thought process of system 2 thinking. And what I'm going to talk about is something called OODA, the OODA loop. And no, it's not this or this. There's my second Star Wars reference. So the OODA loop was developed by a Air Force, now he's a general, but it was a model for decision making when dogfighting. Basically, what you're doing is you're observing, you're orienting it, your position, you're making a decision, and then you act on it. And that whole cycle is kind of what your brain goes through when you're trying to make that decision and what you're going to do. So in order to win, we should operate at a faster tempo or rhythm than our adversaries, or better yet, get inside the adversary's observation, orientation, decision, action, time cycle, or loop. You want to be able to break that loop or get into that loop so that they observe and then they're acting. Same thing applies when it comes to cyber criminals, magicians, con artists, politicians. They're all trying to hijack that OODA loop by creating that knee-jerk reaction so that you get an action out of them. They get the action out of you with what they want. So you think of a phishing link, you get an email that comes in that says, hey, you got a change in benefits, open up the PDF. And money is always the first thing. And so when benefits are changing, people freak out. They may not check who it's from. They may not realize there's a banner that says it's from an external email. It's a benefits change with your organization. And oh my gosh, what the heck is happening now? So that's kind of where that reaction comes in. All right, I'm going to move on to security awareness. Murray, any comments? Any things you want to add?
Yeah, so let's see if we can dig into this for a second, James, because sitting in my CISO suite, we always think of these decisions that we have to try to teach people about. And the hardest thing with the system 1, system 2 that we have to get our employees, our team members, our peers to think about is taking the emotion out of it. Because people are gullible, people are susceptible, people do have emotions of denial. Nothing can happen to me, I have my antivirus. How do we get people to understand that this loop is also very much tied to their emotional state?
A lot of it comes down to having to take a moment. It's kind of like when somebody says something to you years ago as kids, you're getting bullied in the schoolyard and they would taunt you or whatever. You had to take a moment. Rather than reacting right away, you had to be able to take that kind of moment when there's something calling for a quick reflexive action. And if you can take the time, there are some things where you can't take a lot of time, like being a dogfighter pilot. But in our offices, when we're looking at email, a lot of people from what I've seen, a lot of people look at email as the bane of their existence. They've got to get through it. They got to get out of there at the end of the day, and they're going to do everything they can. But when emails are coming in, and especially on ones that you're not expecting, on emails that look weird, you want to take that extra moment. When I got hired by KnowBe4, I think I'd been employed for all of about a week. And one of the things that we do at KnowBe4 is we are constantly phishing our employees, always. I get at least 2 a week. But the first one I got, and it came into my inbox and I saw it, and this is, again, first week, so not getting a lot of email. And it comes up and it's a Google alert, which is what we use for our email, is Gmail. And it pops up and it says, your user account was logged in Bangalore, India. I'm like, I've only been here a week. How the heck has somebody already logged into my account? And it had a little button there. It said, click the button to review your logins. It had the Google layout. It had a little map of Bangalore. It looked legit. Well, the funny thing is one of my new colleagues who'd been there for years, he was in the office with me, and I took the moment and I turned and I looked at him. I said, I don't believe this. I've been here a week and already somebody's got a hold of my email address and hacked it. Oh, hang on a second. And I swung back and I hovered over the link and I'm like, yeah, that's not a Google address. But because I'd taken the moment to explain it to my colleague, that moment gave me, and also when you say things out loud, sometimes they kind of present themselves a little differently. But I had taken the moment and stepped back and went, oh, hang on a second, maybe this isn't real. And lo and behold. So a lot of it comes down to being able to try to take that moment when you can. You may not always be able to, but I think with email, there's a good opportunity that you can take that extra couple seconds to make sure that whether it's real or not. And we're going to talk about
we can train around the emotion, in other words.
Yeah.
So we can, and the whole point I guess we're getting to here is that the culture has to be trained and ingrained in, remove the emotion so that you can take the practical steps to get to where you need to be.
Yep.
Fair. Okay.
Cool. So let's touch upon security awareness a little bit. Can't have a security presentation unless you've got some good memes. So here's one. If you're not preparing for an attack, and this is going back to what Murray was talking about earlier with regards to knowing your assets and everything else, you now have to be prepared that there's an attack coming within your organization. There's a favorite saying that a lot of us have that, you've been breached and you know it, or you've been breached and you don't know it. And if you don't know it, then what do you do to make sure that you're protecting your assets, your critical assets, crown jewels, whatever you want to call them, that thing, that golden nugget, the thing that makes your company what it is, how are you protecting that? And so it's no longer a concept of the bad guys are going to get in. It's what do you do when they do get in, and how do you make sure you protect it? And so you want to make sure that you were prepared for those kind of attacks. Hence, with security awareness, we're preparing that we get phishing emails coming in all the time from adversaries. We can rely on technology, and technology will do a good chunk of it. But the cyber criminals are sitting all around the world with the same equipment and hardware technology that organizations have. And they are throwing their phishing emails against that technology to see what goes through. And when they find the one that gets through, that gets set aside. And that's what gets used, because otherwise there's still, I know from a technology standpoint, there's still a lot of emails getting stopped at the gate, but the criminals are still able to figure out which ones get through the defenses, so to speak. So from an awareness testing standpoint, you want to make sure, personally, I like to do one before the train your users, and that is phish them first. Get an idea of what we call our phish prone percentage. Figure out how prone they are to phishing emails, and then you educate them, and then you continue to phish them to make sure that they're not falling susceptible to the latest type of phishing attacks. I mean, even this week right now with the president's healthcare plan that he's trying to come out, we're starting to see an uptick in those type of phishing emails coming out COVID vaccine, COVID information, we're still seeing a lot of those type of phishing emails come out. So it's always good to make sure that you're keeping up to date and assessing your users, and then review the results, and then kind of keep going through in that circle. Murray, any comments?
No, this
Yeah.
is absolutely fair. And I can tell you from just, being again, a CISO, 9 out of 10 attacks that get past the gate are phishing, even into my organization. And we take security very seriously. But one of the hardest challenges with this entire process and changing the culture is, as you said, working from home, because people are more relaxed. We're now at home. We have, our computers on our dining room tables or a dedicated location. I can come down in the morning with my coffee and be in pajamas still. How do we get the culture and this training to stick when people are still in this relaxed state? What do you do?
Yeah, well, you can't, and that kind of brings me to this point, and I'm gonna work in the answer here. Essentially, traditional awareness programs fail to account for a knowledge intentional gap, behavior gap, and that's kind of where we're hitting on right now. People know that they've got to be able, they know about the security awareness, but that secure behavior isn't exactly the same thing. You can be passionate and drive forth, but if you work against human nature, you're going to end up failing. If you push at them, trying to shove it down their throat, they're going to reject it. You give them, and we talked about it earlier with the compliance, if you give them that security training program, and it's a computer-based training, they're literally going to sit there and go, next, click, 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 do the quiz as best as they can, and they can probably take it however many times, but they'll retain that information to take the assessment and get the 80% or 90% that's needed and pass, and then forget it. Because what we're dealing with is the mindset of, just because I'm aware, that doesn't mean I care. And that's kind of where we get back to those norms of, we're lazy, we're creatures of habit, and we're social. We are, we're now working at home, we're relaxed, lazy, sure. But you are in that work environment, you are a lot more relaxed and certainly a lot more susceptible to those type of phishing attacks, as we've been seeing on the rise over the last 6 months. And so now what we have to do is increase that behavior. And so this brings up, a graph. But essentially, BJ Fogg, as I said already, he's kind of the father of the behavior design. And essentially what you're dealing with behaviors, and I'm explaining about behaviors and kind of getting a little psychology here, because again, we're trying to work with people. And if you work against them and try and shove all the information and don't understand where they're coming from, your program ends up failing or isn't as successful. That's kind of a better way to put it. But essentially you're dealing with motivation, ability, and a prompt to be able to get them to do that behavior. So let's take an example. Let's kind of explain, tell you what I'm talking about here. So let's look at one of our favorite behaviors, checking links. When they get those emails and they got to check the link. Why should they check the link? We know why, because as security professionals, it introduces phishing, increases risk in an organization, and increases that type of attack surface. But the motivation here is making sure it's not a phishing link, not having to do remedial training, because if it is a phishing link and I'm being tested, I don't want to have to do it again. Motivation is you're going to protect the organization. You want to try and get people to think that they are a part of the security organization. And I've had conversation after conversation with people that say, yeah, but I'm not part of accounting or I'm not part of HR. Well, technically, if you think about it, you are. When you hear about job postings or you're trying to do a job posting, you're out trying to recruit people. You're doing the work of HR. When it comes to your expense reports, granted, we haven't been doing a lot of traveling, but when it comes to your expense reports, you have to take certain steps, follow certain policies to make sure that you're submitting your expenses properly or your budgets, your P&L. You're doing all that. That is working with finance. The same thing now applies from the IT cybersecurity aspect. You are a part of the company. Everybody needs to be feel as a part of that security team, because we can't do it without you, as cheesy as that sounds. But that's where that motivation is them wanting to be able to protect the organization. They want to keep doing their job. If if the organization ends up suffering a ransomware attack, jobs could be lost. Yes, usually we hear about CISOs and CEOs, but if business takes a downturn, it may not be an immediate effect, but it is something that could trickle on down. So motivation, want to be able to protect the organization. Your ability, knowing how to find the link. You have to be trained and then understand what you're looking for in that link, which can be tricky. But if you don't know what to look for in the link, you need to have the ability on who to send it to that can help you. So whether or not you've got an alert button or capability within your organization to send it, it's letting the people know that, hey, here, you can help fight the bad guys with phishing as well. If you think it's phishing, send it on through. Now, if you start seeing emails coming in from that person every single time they get a link, good, bad, or indifferent, well, then there's an opportunity to kind of take a little extra training with them to kind of educate them with that. The prompt, basically the email may appear to be strange, it's unexpected. That's the prompt that they're getting, that they need to go ahead and check the link, and so forth. Okay, so behaviors, checking link, looking at that motivation, that ability, and that prompt. The other thing that you can do is a concept that we call nudge. And this theory came from Richard Thaler and Kay Sunstein. They've got a whole book on it, came out like 2005, I think. And it's another way to encourage behavior. And it's by nudging your employees. So here's a couple examples to give you an idea. This is for all the guys in the audience. In Germany, there was a custodian that worked in a school. And every night when he had to go clean the boys' bathroom, there was a mess on the floor. Just all around the urinals, it was just messy. And realized that maybe he needed to give the boys a nudge with something. And so he painted little flies in each of the urinals. And when he went back the next day to clean the floor, there was a lot less of a mess because now the boys had something to aim at. That's a nudge. Cheesy, but it worked. Another kind of nudge, this is something we probably see around a lot when we've got a bottle of soda, Coke, it's one of the plastic bottles, or a bottle of water, and we need to throw it away. We see a landfill and we see a recycle bin. The landfill looks all disgusting, it's all garbage. The recycle is all nice and clean, fresh new bottles. And so that kind of nudges you to make sure you recycle it and put it into the nice bin. Touching upon the kids, you go to the grocery store, you got your toddler, teenager, whatever in tow. Instead of getting free cookies, they're giving out free fruit. And the nudge is the ruler that's next to the sign. Essentially, eat fruit, grow up nice and tall. And so every time the kids come in, they get a free piece of fruit, and then they see how tall they are. It's that nudge to get them to eat fruit. Even though you could tell your kids, eat fruit, and they'd be like, nah. Now, this just gives them that kind of a nudge. And then finally, the nudge of donating money. And we see this a lot where organizations will be like, hey, round up your to the nearest dollar, and that goes to a charity. And here it's right in front of you, and you're like, okay, it's going to be 15 cents. Yeah, that's fine. It's that nudge. Rather than asking you for a handout or a donation, it's just a roundup. It's a click for you. It's that nudge to do it. So nudging them in the right direction from a cybersecurity standpoint, and a lot of you have probably seen this with regards to passwords. When you're typing in, you have to create that new password, and you type in 5 or 6 characters, and you got the red bar, not great. Your goal is to get that green bar. And so you add 16 characters, uppercase, lowercase, numbers, whatever. And now it turns green. Now you've got, yes, okay, I got the strong password, I'm good to go. That's the little nudge in with the behaviors. And so when we're looking at all these behaviors, again, from the human nature standpoint, we got to have the motivation, got to give them the ability and have that prompt so that they can get that nudge, so that you can get the behavior that you want, whether it's checking links, creating strong passwords, not avoiding people from tailgating, those kind of things. From a CISO perspective, Murray, any thoughts with regards, or did I answer your question from before, or am I going to
You
get?
did. You bring up 100 different questions that I can say, and I can tell you that in practice, we actually nudge people with a little bit different of an incentive. And I
Okay.
never thought of using the word nudge to do it. My frequent violators have their privileges pulled away. Their
Right.
laptops actually become more hardened and more restrictive. The users that do the right thing, we allow them to elevate privileges by just saying why they need it versus opening a change control ticket, things of that nature. So we nudge behavior by them basically operating with good cybersecurity hygiene. And there's probably 100 other types of nudges that you could do, anything from reward programs and challenge programs to you get new toys when frequently. Internally, if you're good, following good hygiene, you get to use your notebook a little bit more freely.
A little more freely. So just out of curiosity, with that carrot stick approach, the ones that get their laptops hardened down, do they have to do any type of additional training or additional things to get that freedom back, or
We do it
gotta
basically
wait
over a period of time, and we do
okay.
do a little bit more training. But essentially, if someone's a repeat offender, they never get any, we don't give admin rights out,
Right.
but we have a way of elevating. It's part of the product line we make. We use our own products. But if they're repeat offenders, no, they have to do a formal change control ticket, or someone from the support desk might have to add the printer for them versus them being able to do it on their own.
So it's learning that hard lesson that, shucks, I shouldn't have left my laptop unlocked, or I shouldn't have
Or shouldn't clicked on that
clicked
email,
on that
or
link.
shouldn't be
Yeah.
doing whatever behavior that is inappropriate. It's changing the culture for people to think, and the reward is more flexibility on their own machine.
So this is a great example, and this is like a real world example.
Mm-hmm.
With the people, are you finding that you have more people, and you don't have to answer the question because it's your organization, but do you find that you've got more people that have the freedom than the people that are locked down?
Oh, by far. It is chronically a couple of repeat offenders, and those are, they are very vertically departmentalized within the organization. Certain departments are obviously much more conscious of it. And I have to say it's more pronounced with newer employees until they properly adapt to the hardening training and the culture we have in place.
Yeah, one of the things in discussions with other organizations and other folks, one of the questions that I hear a lot is, should we fire the employee if they click on a link?
No, never. I personally do not subscribe to that. In fact, every executive or every other peer of mine, we've all fallen for it in one way or another. It's been on the phone. It was late at night. It was after a couple of cocktails. You know what? We are human. We make these mistakes.
Right.
But the repeat offenders, whether it's more training, more phishing, harder locking down. Early in my career, a peer of mine kept on dropping their notebook.
No.
You know what? You go, why? How do you keep on dropping it? They ended up getting them a Panasonic Tough book. Just look, drop it as much as you want.
Right.
Type of approach.
Yeah. A lot of the time, and for us, not as an organization, but in general, what we promote is you need to understand what your policy is when it comes to your security programs and with regards to phishing and that kind of thing. Yes, everybody makes a mistake. You get the training. Even our CEO at NobleForce, Stu Showerman, has clicked on a couple links of ours over the years that he's fallen for. Knock wood, I'm still good. I haven't clicked on any, but doesn't mean that's not going to happen. But usually, yeah, your repeat offenders 2, 3, 4 times. Okay, management discussions, HR, CISO brought in. If you're getting up to 6 or 7 over a very short, within a year, you start to get the sense that the employee either isn't taking the security culture at heart or feel that they're a part of it. And sometimes it may no longer be a fit. So you want to have something in your policy that allows you to deal with, those consequences or whatever ends up happening.
And some people are not trainable, no joke. It is a hard lesson. But there's also the one factor that always scares me. It's the person that is supposed to be opening all the attachments and clicking on the links.
Right.
HR gets a ton.
Yes.
Everybody, you get PDFs all the time in HR. They are supposed to open them.
Right.
So they become a little bit more susceptible, not necessarily lazy or gullible, but that is their job
Yeah.
to look at resumes.
And
So the
that's,
technique of using a nudge to improve the culture,
yeah,
huge, huge.
exactly. Yeah. And going back to that, yeah, where they're opening PDFs, that's kind of where you rely on your technology a little bit to be able to scan those and make sure that they're clean or whatever. But anyway,
Yep.
exactly. We got to work with technology. We can't all do it on our own. So let's dive into some more the concepts here of security culture. Essentially, security culture is, the codification or the compilation of beliefs and behaviors and values that we have that we accept as norms, within society. So from a security standpoint, our security culture, it's going to be that collaboration, compilation of norms that we have where, you check your phishing links, you create strong passwords, you don't leave your laptop unlocked, those kind of things. That's what we're creating in security culture. But it lives and breathes within every organization. The question now becomes how strong, intentional, and sustainable, and that's the key part, is your security culture? And then what do you need to do about it? Whether you're the one implementing the program or trying to support the culture. So here's a little bit of context when it comes to the task at hand. So there we have the sun, that little dot in the lower part of the galaxy there. It's kind of like the size of your security team, that small dot compared to the size of your organization. Of course, you could have 1,000 people, you could have 10,000, 100,000 people. But basically the size of your security team is like that tiny pea in the grand scheme of things, that needle in the haystack. So how do you then improve the culture? How do you impress upon the security culture to everybody that it's important, that they need to do it, and so forth? How are you influencing that? So organizations believe that security culture is important for success. We did a survey on it, and that's kind of the results there. Yeah, 94% people believe, yes, security culture is needed. We also found this. How do you find security culture? Murray, you touched upon it earlier about compliance. Some people think that 30% believe that compliance to security policies. 22% believe it's everybody's responsibility. 24 are looking at awareness and understanding. But what we're finding is there isn't really a true definition of security culture. People have all different ideas and perceptions of it, good, bad, or indifferent, but there really isn't one way to be able to look at defining it. So Murray, do you fit in one of these, or do you have your own definition of security culture?
I look at the statistics and I'm a little scared. I agree with the 29%. That's the argument that I made earlier.
Yeah.
22% of people responding that security is everyone's responsibility is important, because that needs to be near 100%. And it has to start with the training, the education, and not only just providing the technology and tools, but just even the basic awareness that, look, you see something odd, you don't necessarily act upon it. You ask for the help, you report it, you delete it, you wait, you verify with the phone call. I think everyone recognizes these numbers have got to be much higher in order to build a security culture in any organization.
Exactly. Yeah. So one of the things that we've created is a security culture framework. And it breaks down into attitudes, behaviors, cognition, norms, responsibilities, communication, and compliance. And so attitudes, that's your I love, I hate, I like, your attitude towards something. So whether, in our case, with regards to security, I hate the fact that I got to carry a badge. I hate the fact that I've got to enter a password every time I log in. I love the fact that, our organization's never been hacked. Your attitude towards security. Your behaviors are those actions and activities that employees have on a direct, whether directly or indirectly to that either policy or action or thing that they need to take care of. Going back earlier to when we were talking about BJ Fogg and his behaviors with motivation and the nudge and everything else. Your cognition is basically the employee's understanding. Do they understand the policy? But then why should they care? But you want to make sure that they have that understanding of what they know what the policy is. The next step then is to try and get them to care. You have the norms, and we're not talking about the guy from Cheers who said at the end of the bar. The norms here is kind of society's acceptance of what's right and what's wrong. So in the sense of somebody going, yeah, every time I get one of those emails, I just click it. I don't care. You know, people are going to kind of add that peer pressure and go, you know, that's not a good idea. You're clicking that. You never know, you know, what you could be letting into the organization. You're essentially opening up the front door for the bad guys to come in. Your responsibilities, looking at what you're responsible for as an organization for that employee. You know, my responsibility is make sure that if I get a phishing email, that I'm either reporting it off to IT or deleting it or whatever the policy is. I'm making sure that if people are coming into the building, that they're not tailgating me, that everybody each has their own badge. Communication goes two ways, either from the information security team, CISO team, down to the employees, and vice versa. You're getting that feedback where before I was talking about, you know, the whole perspective of the employee. Yeah, I know about it, but I don't care. But then you have to understand where they're coming from. Is there a reason they don't care? Is it boring? Is it just another thing I got to do to be a part of the company? You know, getting that communication and understanding whether you need to go sit with them to be able to keep that communication going. And then compliance. Well, compliance, as Murray already said, with regards to, you know, you have those regulations, they know that they have to comply, they have to do the training. So Kai Rower is the guy that created up this whole framework, and he works with us at KnowBe4. But basically the methodology, this is what defines an organization's security culture. You take all of these 7 different concepts, and that's kind of where you're going to build your security culture program with. Looking at your attitudes, your behaviors, your norms, cognition, kind of pulling them all together and allowing the opportunity for the employee to get that understanding, get the communication, make them, you know, feel like they're a part of the security team, but it helps drive that and eventually gets that behavior as well, incorporating the motivation, the prompt, and the nudge as well. So understanding critical nuances. Context is the key here in this case. You know, you're going to have different cultures. You know, cultures are based, your security culture, but you're going to have, depending on your organization, you could have regional cultures. You know, certain people act a certain way in the South versus the North versus in Japan versus the UK. It could be different with departmental. Murray already touched upon the fact that certain departments are could be a lot more stringent when it comes to the phishing emails because they're always getting those PDFs coming into HR versus your research and developer team or a product team where they're like, yeah, we don't need to worry about security. Our product doesn't connect to the internet. Those are the kind of norms and culture perspective that they're going to have that you want to be able to drive in there. Preferential styles, you know, things of that nature. Now, when you're getting your culture, you can't just throw it all out at once, kind of hope and pray that it's spaghetti and see what sticks on the wall. You need to figure out what behaviors you need to work on within your organization. Which specific ones are there? Is it dealing with social engineering? Is it dealing with phishing emails? Is it with the passwords? Is it making sure people aren't dropping laptops? You know, you look at those particular types of behaviors and focus in on those. And so it's kind of like, all right, this year we're going to focus on passwords. Next year we're going to focus on, or next quarter, we're going to focus on something else within to drive and get that culture up. And then you assess and review that as you go along, whether that's through surveys, whether it's through assessments, you know, whatever the case may be. And then monitor that to make sure it's going in the direction you're going. If not, then like any project that you work on, you take a step back, reevaluate, and then move forward. So 5 practical ways to grow security culture. It's for everybody in your organization, everybody from the front desk up to the boardroom, and especially the boardroom because they're the ones making all the decisions. Ditch the jargon. One of the things, and when I talk about the jargon, you know, a lot of people know what phishing is because we've been learning it, and that's fine. But when you start talking, sometimes, you know, if you're going into a boardroom, you got to talk about risk, you got to talk management, loss of revenue, you got to talk money. But if you go into a boardroom and start talking about cybersecurity and concepts with that, you're going to lose them. If you're going down to your employees, you want to make sure you're getting the right communication path with them that's appropriate for them. Training and awareness has got to be frequent. This is not a once a year, once every 6 months. This needs to be ongoing. If it's in the culture, if it's in the organization, then it becomes a part of them, whether it's posters, whether it's stickers, whether it's badges, whatever it is that helps that. If you're going to work against human nature, and I said this already, you're going to fail. If you just keep shoving it, or you have your department to know and keep turning down all the requests, right now, especially with a lot of people working from home, some people are almost creating these shadow ITs. You want to work with those folks rather than just saying, nope, can't have it, because they're going to still try and find a way. And then finally, building that healthy culture with examples of ideal behavior. The carrot and the stick, you're protecting the organization, you're doing the right things, you get a little more freedom on your laptop. You're clicking on links, you're not having strong passwords, whatever the case, we're going to have to lock it down because you're seen as a risk, essentially. Go ahead, Murray.
Yeah, there's a really important piece in this, and this is an excellent model to think about, but also think of the negative. You don't want to threaten people, as we've discussed, with their job.
Right.
I know people do it. It actually creates a culture completely opposite of this. Having a paranoid workforce that if they do something wrong, they're going to get fired is not good. It's just not. You need that power in your code of conduct if someone is doing something intentionally malicious or stealing data to enforce it and terminate them, but you shouldn't penalize them for being human. Right. So take the positive, assume positive intent, and assume that their behavior is trying to do the right thing, and then help guide and teach them, not threaten them. And that's why these steps are so important in building your security culture.
It gives me a neat idea. I wish we were doing this presentation live, Murray, because I would basically bring out a bag of carrots and give everybody a carrot. Lead with the carrot. Lead with the
carrot. That's right. You get more bees with honey than you do with vinegar. So
Right. I'm not bringing any bees to a meeting, though. Carrots are
fair.
Yeah, but no, you're exactly right. Yeah, the rewarding concept is good. There are going to be people that are going to make mistakes. You want to educate them, but sometimes there is a time where, like you said, they can't be educated. You never want to, I think people are always under the fear of, if I do something wrong, am I going to get fired? You don't want that even as a part of your own organizational culture, let alone security culture. But yeah, you want to make sure that the rewards are there. There's the understanding, and the employees are going with the program, essentially. So got pretty well wrapping up here. Essentially, what's next? We've been talking about this all along, increasing that frequency. If you're only doing security training once a year, bump it up. You want to be doing it a lot more, doing the assessing and the educating, and it doesn't have to be a 30-minute training presentation. It could be something where within different departmental meetings, you have the managers pick somebody in the employee and go, okay, go ahead and research a security concept. Here's a list of them, and you're going to present at the next meeting. And then they get educated. And I'm going to speak from experience because I learn so much more when I'm teaching, because the research and then presenting it and discussing it, having those conversations, that helps ingrain it a lot more. So if you can do it in departmental meetings, have that tip. When I worked for Siemens and I would go visit power plants, every time I stepped foot on a power plant, there was always the health and safety training, because health and safety was the most important. We didn't want people dying in these power plants or getting injured. And health and safety was always driven. The same concept, I think, can apply within our organizations. Every meeting, have somebody bring up a security tip as they would have brought up a health and safety tip. So, kind of bringing that through, looking at ways to be able to measure it, whether, if it's your culture through surveys or you're looking at tickets, different ways that you can do that. And then again, motivate the employees with the carrot, make it every day, or at least every week, some sort of concept that goes along with it. When it comes to your security awareness, your training programs, your culture, plan like a marketer. Get with your marketing team, but test it like an attacker. The bad side of information security. You know how the bad guys think. Great. Get with your marketing person and kind of bring the two together and be able to come up with a different plan for different folks and be able to market out to them. You know, whether it's different training modules, posters, stickers, phishing assessments, videos. Videos work great. Just want to leave you with, you know, it's National Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Cheesy plug, know before. We've got a whole kit that you can use. That's my sales pitch. I'm done. Consider your organizational culture that values security versus having an organization with security culture. I'm going to leave you with that because that's going to, when I read that earlier today, I'm like, oh, that's perfect. I love that saying. Essentially, you want your whole organization to recognize and accept security and security programs versus the organization having to adopt security. So 4 minutes left, Bob.
Yeah, that was
Unless
pretty
Murray
good.
wants to add anything else. Sorry, I didn't give you a chance, Murray.
Yeah, if anybody has questions, please go ahead and submit them. There was one comment in the chapter. Did you guys read that? Organization, the internet across country lines.
Do you see that as a response to all the
Came from Anthony Johnson.
I know that the government is coming forward and saying you're not allowed to start paying ransom. But to my understanding, that is for country or criminal groups that have already been sanctioned.
Yes, sanctioned countries and sanctioned organizations.
Right. Evil.
If you pay the ransom, you could be violating the law. So you're pretty much in a very gray area because you may not even know who's operating that ransomware behind the scenes.
Yeah, there was a particular navigational GPS kind of company earlier this year that got hit, and it was done by Revel, and they had to pay. They wanted to pay, and what they did is they worked with the FBI and DHS and were able to pay to. No, they didn't pay. No, they worked with them anyway to solve it, but they were they ended up pulling up from backups, but they worked with them, and if you had to pay to get the decryption key, you know, you could work with them and negotiate. But yeah. Any others? Where are the slides located? They're right here on my computer. I will get a PDF. Actually, oh, I don't have my email address on here.
We're going to get them posted.
Okay, I'll get you the PDF, Bob. So
yeah, and CSNP. One of the comments I want to make, we've been currently working with a rather large health organization, really focused on helping them with their security culture and awareness. And what was interesting, it goes back to some of the comments you made, what they're seeing, you would think in all their departments, they were more concerned about the IT department, the R&D department, the legal department, whereas where the threats were, it wasn't. It was in the accounting and finance department.
Okay.
It goes to the analogy, and I don't know if many people have seen it before, that during World War II, they would get bombers that would land and bombers that would fail. And they brought it back and they started looking at them, and where all the bullet holes were, the first assumption is we got to put more armor there. And the engineer who was smart about it goes, no, the places that we don't see bullet holes are the ones that are actually going down. That's where we need to put more armor. So you have to really think about where the risks are within a business. And many times it's not the developers, unless they're doing, you know, certain other tasks, because they're not forward facing. People don't necessarily know who to target on the internet. It's your public figures, your forward facing addresses, your executives, people that may have high profile LinkedIn profiles and things like that. They're going to be the first round that are going to get attacked.
And they'll even go after the families of them too.
Yes, they will.
Yes, they will. Well,
yes, they will.
Yeah, it's the same organization also. I think the one person in finance wherever had clicked on 2 phishing emails and they wanted them fired. And I go, nah, it's probably not the best approach. So culture is so important.
Yes,
culture is so important. And I'll leave you just with one anecdote. It's something we do internally. We try to promote a positive intent, at least in my own company's culture. We do something called praise. Just like some people might do security training in, let's say, a large petrochemical company before every meeting, we always go around the room and ask the attendees to say something good that someone has done. whether they did well on a project, whether they supported something, whether they did volunteer. You pump people up and they want to come to work. They feel energized. They know they're being appreciated. And then when you have to do hard things like security culture and train them to things that are not natural, it's much more acceptable. So assume positive intent and make people feel valued really goes a long way in trying to solve these problems.
Sure, sure. One other comment, did you read in comment about the privacy paradox?
Privacy paradox. People want to be secure, but want to share, for example, the information you find of people on Facebook. Any tips on handling this paradox? Well, I mean, this goes back to my days of safe and secure online, talking to grade schoolers and high school kids and seniors. You know, whatever you post online, yeah, you want to share it, but you also have to have the understanding that it could show up on the I-4 billboard at some point. We are kind of, in the way I see it, you know, we are kind of crossing that threshold where people are sharing so much stuff, especially, you know, the younger generation, and they're sharing so much stuff, but it's so much easier for people to be able to go out now and do open source intelligence searches, go and find what's probably out there and use it against them. So for me, it came back to, you know, an education of, hey, if you're posting it out there, you're sharing with everybody, even if you think you've got the privacy settings set on Facebook or whatever else, it can come back to get you. But I think we're certainly getting into another generation where they're sharing a lot. One of the things I found very interesting, on Netflix, there's a movie called The Social Dilemma. I think everybody should watch it and have their kids who are on social media watch it. Mainly because of the algorithms, they're being exposed to, and based on likes and things that they're doing. I know my two daughters that are in college, they have brought down their level of sharing after seeing that. So, but that's my.
And there's an important add piece to that. If you consider everything that you post online as public, you have to also consider what's being done with it. Laws in Europe are very different than here, so let's separate that out for a second. There are organizations, specifically marketing companies, that are feeding on what you post. I won't mention names, but one of them literally will scrape everything they can find on the internet about a person and literally offer, hi, here's a university mug. Here's something that will appeal to them from a marketing perspective. So it's not only destructive in terms of what you could be targeted as in terms of attack, it's also being spun in terms of marketing, or what's called personification. So you have to be aware that if you get that email that says, hey, I saw you went to the University of Central Florida, would you like a US nightshirt? That automatically social engineers you for a little more trust because, wow, they know my school. But it could have just been a good marketing engine that scraped that from your websites. Yep. So those are also angles that have to be trained and you have to think about. I think we have one last question and then we could probably have to break. I'll field it over to you guys. Do you believe that the email protocol is fundamentally flawed and that is the reason for all phishing attacks? Guys, what do you think?
Read me the question one more time.
Sure, just read it quick. Do you believe that the email protocol is fundamentally flawed and that is the reason for all phishing attacks?
Well, from a technology standpoint, there are other things that are in place that you can do to protect your email, you know, to prevent against spoofing, DMARC, SPIF, and that's a whole other presentation in itself. But there is technology that you can do, you know, and there is certain things that they've done to the protocols, or at least from an encryption standpoint, they can do to protect it. But I think technology comes in. We're basically playing the cards that we got dealt to us. And, you know, technology is going to help us, and hopefully the human will help us as well.
Yeah, my take is, yeah, email protocol is flawed. A lot of the technology is flawed. If it wasn't, you wouldn't have so many breaches, right? You just wouldn't. So is that the reason for phishing attacks? Part of it is the reason, but the real reason is the people and the psychology of what we covered here tonight, because that's the real reason. Is why there's so many phishing attacks, because it's the least path of resistance and it works.
And I would just add to that, as a part of a good security culture, trust but verify. There might be flaws in emails, but if something looks suspicious or sounds too good to be true, pick up the phone, send a second email back with a new sender. Don't reply to the one that's suspicious. Make that a part of your culture.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Bob, back to you.
Hey, well, Maureen, James, thank you so much. I'm glad you took the time
Thank you.
tonight. And this has been good. I hope everyone on here and participants got something out of it. And again, this will be posted. It's recorded. And I'm going to stop the recording right now. And it will be posted. So appreciate the time and thank you. Have a good evening.